everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. English language teachers worldwide, welcome to an American TESOL Institute webinar. This is Collocations and the Power of the Three R's, brought to you by yours truly, Fluency MC, better known as, or also known as, Jason R. Levine. I'm so proud and privileged to be here each month with a webinar to help English language teachers around the world continue their professional development. And I also host Featured Teachers, a monthly webinar by the American TESOL Institute, where we feature a teacher from around the world who has made an impact, a considerable impact on English language teachers and learners everywhere in ELT land. So welcome. Collocations and the Power of the Three R's. Unless you are very new to English language teaching, I have a strong feeling that the word collocation resonates with you. The three R's, if you follow me, Fluency MC, you might know about those three R's, and spoiler alert, they're right here on the title page, because that's my credo, my motto, as it were: relax, repeat, remember. But we need to unpack that, and that's what we're planning to do here tonight. How do collocations relate so directly to the three R's? That's our theme. That's where we're going. Thank you for being here, whether you're watching live. Thank you for joining live, everybody, or you're watching the recording. So let's get started. Big up to American TESOL Institute for hosting these webinars. So if we're talking about collocations in the three R's, let's start by defining our terms. What are collocations? Well, collocations, whether it's something like, okay, I'm going to walk to the door, or I'm going to open the door's ajar, a large door, a door to another dimension, right? How many word chunks are there with door, right? That's a noun that could have adjectives, right, that precede it, that chunk together with door, or complements that go after it with door. Especially, we use a lot of verbs like slam the door, shut the door, close the door, open the door. Is it better to learn the meaning of the word open separately from the meaning of the word door, or is it better to learn it as a chunk of language? Again, if you are an experienced teacher of a foreign language, could be English or any other language, you probably understand the idea of how chunking words together is easier for our minds to remember and then subsequently use language. So collocations, supremely important. I'm here at the beginning, at the outset, defining the term because very soon we will see how we can apply what we know about collocations to our lessons, to our learning experiences for students. So in case my banal explanation of collocations and examples, not in case that, because they probably didn't give you such a colorful picture of what a collocation is, here we go. And back in the day, and I'm trying to sort of resurrect this, collo, it'll follow. I mean, I was so obsessed with collocations, I shortened it. My students were talking about collaring this, collaring that. Interestingly, there was never anything so practical with synonyms, synonym this, synonym that. So synonyms are hugely important, but arguably collocations are more important. Instead of trying to figure out a word that you can use similarly or to replace a word you already know, can you use the word you already know? What do you do with words like passionate, mutual, everlasting? Oh, here we have a noun, love. What do you do with the head word like noun? So here we go. In case you aren't sure what a collocation is, we have this head word love. And up here we have some adjectives that go with it. We have verbs, some of which have prepositions. or maybe to be in love, to look for love, or directly find love, share love. Here we have more down here. No distinction really here. This is just what I used to call a color print or a color poster. When I was of the mind that if you get enough exposure looking at pictures and posters, you'll remember collocations. Hold on to that thought, because there was a moment where I realized that didn't work. But anyway, it's nice to have a list for reasons we'll get into. Here we have complements of the noun love. To have love for your country. Love hurts. Love of my life. So if we're talking about collocations and the power of the 3 R's, what is the relationship between these word chunks and relax, repeat, remember, which you see down here and everywhere on each slide? What are the 3 R's? But what does it mean when I say relax, repeat, remember? Why is it that people learning languages, and from now on, let's just talk about English, people learning English around the world, regardless of their age, regardless of their where they're located, their socioeconomic status, what is it about students, learners who I meet, and I think maybe some of you meet if you're teachers of English out there, that suddenly, even though they may not have, more hours of the week in the classroom with you, are acquiring English at a rate that's faster than other students, that they are continually seeking out opportunities to get English. How does that happen? At the very base, I believe it's this. They have had some exposure to English, whether it's through friends, through television, through music, through you as a teacher, whatever it is, where they have had the opportunity to practice the 3 R's. So we're going to dig deeper into this. But first, let's go to something that I believe most of you watching have either studied directly in an academic program, or if you haven't, as inspired teachers of language, of English, specifically for what we're talking about, this is something that will immediately click. So Bloom's taxonomy, the hierarchy of cognitive objectives for teachers, which is from the 50s, 1955, if I believe. It's been reconfigured in different ways. What I have here is something that I believe is simple, possibly, it's simplified. You might find it simplistic. Oh, there we go with some very different adjectives. But at any rate, for the purposes of what I want to talk to you about here today, this is great. We have the verbs: remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. I'm sure that most teachers out there are trying to get students to use English up here, right? Not to just be simply learning things by rote, and that's it. We cut them off, and you're only learning to think critically in your first language. What we want to do is help our learners get to this level of language learning. Notice this word here, remember. So here's the thing. We may have that intention, and we may be working, from the heart in that direction. However, there's a paradigm that goes way, way back in language teaching, where the focus is on studying the language. And it's interesting and a bit depressing at times to see so many teachers who believe so much in the idea of helping students get to the level where they are using English, meaning they are out there in the world, whether it's taking a test, whether it's having a job interview that succeeds, whether it's moving to another country. We're helping in No Borders English. Plug out a plug for selfless plug, is that it? Well, selfish plug for New Borders English. we're helping Ukrainians at this moment, and we'll extend it very soon to other people in countries where they've been displaced and need to move, to learn English, to use it in real life. The thing about using English, right, is that it's not as simple as studying the language and making the leap to using English. And that's what we're going to look at again when we check out Bloom's taxonomy. So let's look a little deeper here at what it means to study English. Again, study a language, in this case, English. Any language can be used here. Studying a foreign language, a second language, practicing that language and using the language. One issue is what the word practice means in first languages around the world. And we'll come back to that. But I think studying English is something that is pretty much, sorry, just letting somebody in here. Thank you for joining live, people. I don't think there would be a lot of argument surrounding what it means to study a language, studying English, right? And it's not something that I'm saying is bad. The problem with studying English, if you're reading the slide here, is that you quickly figure out that if you're trying to build a skill, especially a communicative skill, studying to prepare yourself for that skill is not enough. So if we compare, playing the piano, playing a sport, tennis, basketball, football, dance, painting pictures, right? It's not enough, obviously, to understand how things work, right? To just, if you understand tennis, can you go out and play tennis? You're learning about English, you're learning about that skill, as opposed to actually preparing yourself to do it. And this is why when you look around at memes like this that circulate on the internet, particularly social media sites like Facebook, you could say, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. We're studying the difference between words fun and funny. This can help me understand what the difference is. Nothing wrong with that. We could look at a list of words to prepare for the IELTS. Here they are arranged alphabetically. Our brains don't think alphabetically, but it would be good, right? If you wanted to hone in on a certain word and look it up. We could move to the more grammatical level. Studying is not bad, obviously. The problem each time that we're studying something and have the feeling that, well, we can then go and use the language is we probably won't remember it. And is it motivating? Well, if you're going to study, if you're interested in linguistics, so I consider myself an applied linguist, right? But if you're more interested or less interested in the application and more interested in analyzing a language, there's a lot you can provide people if that's your role. However, that's not what we're talking about right here for English language teachers around the world. We are not talking about educating learners to how to analyze the language. If you are, that's fine. But, if you are in a situation where you have learners, and as most of us are in that situation, we want to help them play the piano, do the dance, right? Now understand how a piano works, or in this case, how a bicycle works. Obviously, this is not how you learned how to ride a bicycle. You got on a bicycle and you rode. Now, if you're someone who's going to repair bicycles, design bicycles, everything on the back end, then it's something else. It's interesting because when people think, yeah, this is so obvious, why are we learning languages this way? You have to understand, in my opinion, how many years, and we're talking about centuries here, learning a language like English was considered more of a subject. Well, here's a great analogy, right? Computer science. If you want to learn computer science because you're interested in the study of computers, that's fine. But there could be nothing more different from that study of computers, the computer science approach, at learning to use computers for your job, what you need to do every day. And that's what English is, isn't it? It's not a subject for most people as something they want to just learn underneath how it works. It's more just go out and use it. And that's like you go out and ride a bike. So if studying English is clear, like going under the microscope on the language, what is practice? Well, if you take a look at what I'm saying here, I hope quickly you'll see that practice is the link between studying and using the language. So it's not about supplanting studying with practice. Let's get rid of it. Let's just practice English and use it. But as we will see shortly, the idea of studying the language and assuming you can use it is the big mistake that most of us make as language learners and language teachers. You can have great lists. Most learners I know will see a list like this and be like, oh, wow, if I could just get those lists in my head, here we go with collocations, which we're going to come back to very soon, with make and do, with what is often called collocation in linguistics. So it's more at the sentence level. Here we have subject-verb agreement, which arguably is not a lexical grammar issue, but what we see here, right, is sort of the marriage, the connection, right, between word level grammar and sentence level grammar. What's important here is for the learner or the teacher to see this and be like, yeah, that's what I need my student to get, or as a student, that's what I need to have. Well, how does that get acquired? If you look at say and tell, and you look at how you can study the grammar of it, and even here, look at it at more of a lexical level with collocations, we can't memorize lists like this. And that's why I have a song to practice it. And I say learn by heart, but more of that later. We've talked about studying the language, learning about how it works, how it's important to do that. That a jump from that to where we are here on this slide using English is the issue that most learners face and teachers in English language teaching face with their learners. So most of us will agree, this is the goal, applying what you've practiced. I call it applying what you've practiced. Unfortunately, in many cases, it's people feeling or teachers saying you need to apply what you've learned, what you've understood. But applying what someone has understood is very different from what someone has practiced. Again, it's back to, can you apply what you've learned about tennis from reading about tennis, or from piano, from reading about piano? You could apply that, but it won't be a skill based application. It will be more like, okay, I can demonstrate, I understand how this works on the academic level. So how can we get our students to do this? Here we go. Do role plays, dialogues, write stories. If we are kind of pushing them to do these things based on what they have studied, what they have tried to understand, it's not going to work. So here we go. In case it hasn't been clear, this is what I think, well, let me say from my years of experience, what I am convinced is the main issue. Most language learners try to go from studying the language to using the language. They try to skip that practice step. Let's go back and look at Bloom's taxonomy, which we saw earlier. Isn't it interesting? We have this idea of remembering things as a foundation. How can you possibly move up and apply knowledge without being able to quickly remember it? With language learning, I wish, and maybe this is something I should be doing, should have done, should be doing, will do, I don't know, a language learning, an SLA, second language acquisition, Bloom's taxonomy. It would not look very different. What it would just do is kind of make it more specific. You know, you need to remember language, remember chunks, remember collocations, meaning more on the sentence level. But in the end, it's all about chunking, right? Getting those here so that you can, well, of course, understand what they mean. That's kind of an obvious thing here. You're getting that, you're getting exposure to it so you can move up. But there's something missing here, and I just kind of said what it was. What's missing here is the idea of practice, even though we've been talking about it. What does it really mean? It's easy to throw around the word. We can say it's not the same as using English. We've talked about how practice means some repetitive exposure to the language. And we're going to get deeper into that. But let's look at this idea here. If you practice something, and let's take for a moment music. If you practice the saxophone, and it's important that you enjoy it, again, something we're going to get to, but let's imagine you enjoy the saxophone, you intrinsically enjoy it, or you really want to be the best saxophone player. Hopefully it's both, right? So you practice, you do it, you repeat it, you get better at it. You get better at playing the saxophone. How do you feel? You feel confident. And with that confidence, you become a more fluent player who can improvise. Let's look at English. If you find an opportunity to practice English, and we're going to get deeper into what that means, you will become more accurate in your pronunciation, in your grammar, use of grammar, the vocabulary you use, and also in your receptive skills. You understand more accurately. Right? You will, whether it's reading or listening to English, you'll feel better, you'll feel more confident, and that's where you get out there and use it. Take a look at the slide. So this is Bloom's taxonomy. You can't cheat it. I mean, I'm not a Bloom, reductionist. I'm not like, I was going to say something about like the Supreme Court looking at the Constitution, because I'm so obsessed as an American with what's going on with women's reproductive rights. But anyway, that's an aside. I'm not someone who feels everything is about Bloom's taxonomy. However, I think it is a basic truth that if you don't have language up here ready to use, right? And that comes through repetition, meaningful repetition. There's no way you're going to move up and be able to use language on a higher level. Have you ever heard this? I have a feeling some of you have. And if you're thinking about that, no doubt you're thinking about variables like this. So many times as a teacher, and I'm wondering out there how many of you teachers have had this experience with adult learners, they'll say that, oh, well, there's no way that they can become fluent in the language, in English, because they're adults, or even, two things are against them. They're adults and they never learned English when they were younger. So in their native language, they could do this. But in a second language, they couldn't. They didn't have the opportunity when they were young, and worse, they're adults. But here's the thing. Can adults get exposure to large amounts of repetitive input in a way that's motivating, in a way that they're relaxed, curious, and engaged? Is it possible for older learners to not worry about mistakes, not be ashamed, to kind of turn off the analytical brain, enjoy learning the language without thinking too much about it? I'm not suggesting it's easy, but it can happen. Do farmers or sailors generally go to the gym? It's not a rhetorical question. I'm asking you guys out there. No. Why not? Oh, yeah, because they're out there all the time getting exercise, building those muscles. Thank you, Robin Williams, RIP Robin Williams and Popeye. If somebody tells you, hey, you know what? You need to exercise, lose some weight, or you might say to yourself, you know what? I need to exercise, lose some weight. I need to go to the gym. How does that feel? Saying you need to do this. It's like, oh, I need to learn English. Well, we need to make an effort. Where does that effort come from? If somebody says you have to do it, or you feel you need to, or you have to for some reason, okay, you're in that extrinsic motivation area. Much better would be, I think, feeling like you just want to go. Whether somebody said, hey, let's go check out the gym. You went, oh, it was fun. There were people, you got into doing it, or you started running, biking, swimming, right? Something just happened to make you interested in it. Well, here's the thing, right? The whole notion of, oh, the reason I'm not learning English, or if you're a teacher out there, as most of you are probably watching this, how come I can't get my students? Well, they need to go to another country. They need to get immersed in English. Okay, but how does that happen? Can everybody afford to go somewhere? Can everybody feel motivated enough to go to the gym, quote unquote? What we know is that what we see here, unless your students have the opportunity to go abroad, to be in environments where they are immersed in English, there needs to be some way that they, quote unquote, work out. So, as I just said, who likes to be told to work out? Who likes to be told you have to go to the gym, you need to get exercise, you need to lose weight? The audiolingual method, the idea here was, okay, we'll put you guys in these classes. You're going to get a lot of repetition to these very functional, well, okay, let me back up a minute. Not necessarily very functional, but let's get you guys in this classroom exposed to language that is, forms the basis of English that you'll need when you go out there in English. What was the problem with that? Even if it, well, not even if, it was, right? It was language where that could be useful. It wasn't in context. There wasn't that intrinsic motivational factor. It was kind of arbitrary, right? You could lose motivation, and many people did. A kind of, in retrospect, a kind of obvious alternative was the communicative approach. We can see why it moved in. Instead of being arbitrary, it was thinking more about the functions of the language. What do our learners need to do with English? But the problem was there wasn't that repetitive exposure. And this is the thing that I noticed as a teacher early on. If you don't get enough exposure, audiolingual was all about exposure, but decontextualized. even though the communicative approach focused on what learners needed to use, learners weren't getting enough exposure to it. Do you know this expression, everybody? Can you fill in the blanks? That's it. Well, you've got a picture of the baby. Don't throw the baby out. But don't throw the baby out with what? Exactly. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, what does that mean when we're looking at audiolingual and communicative approach? And if I've lost anybody out there, how does this relate to collocations and the power of the 3 R's? Don't worry, I'm going to come back to that. But if you watched the first part of this webinar, and if you didn't, please go back and check it out. I hope you'll find the connection between what I talked about earlier and what I'm getting to here is pretty clear. What was good about audiolingual? The repetition, the idea that there's no way you can use a language without practicing. Like there's no way you could play a tennis match without practicing tennis and doing a lot of repetitive practice to get prepared to play, and any other sport or music or dance or any art or painting, learning to drive a car, right? None of that can happen. No skill competence can be achieved without repetitive practice. Just doesn't happen. However, because it was decontextualized, because it didn't take into account what people wanted to do with language, when communicative language came along, unfortunately, early on, there was more of an emphasis on drilling and repetitive practice, but not enough. That's where we are right now. Early in my teaching career, I figured this out, and that's why I got very interested in the lexical approach. Michael Lewis and all of the folks that developed the lexical approach, because I saw that, okay, whether it's audiolingual or whether it's communicative, in any case, how should we look at language acquisition? Should we look at it in terms of learning single words, learning how punctuation works, translating? All of these things were obviously wrong. So when I learned about chunking, that language should be looked at from the perspective of lexis and how grammar is sort of the glue that ties it together, it was obvious. Collocations, of course, are those building blocks, as we talked about earlier. They are chunks of language. So in English, do we say do homework or make homework? In some languages, there's only one verb. In English, there are two. The only way to really be sure that we say do homework and not make homework, it's not a rule, but rather the collocation. Do an effort or make an effort. The more exposure you have to the correct phrase, the more likely your brain will automatically inform you it's make an effort. So we have lists we can and we can make them look pretty. I had one earlier with the word love, and here we have make and do, and they're complements. A computer, of course, could just take what we see here on the screen and you can upload to that computer, and that computer can spit it out. It doesn't work that way with people. How do we get those collocations, those chunks up here so that we can quickly, fluently, accurately and fluently use them? So take a look here. My experience as a language teacher, I feel is very, very similar to most language teachers, or I'll say language teachers who are, motivated to really help learners get out there and use language accurately and fluently. And that is that we recognize pretty early that it's about chunking language. The idea of a collocation clicks, resonates right away. If you're like me, at some point, you realize that the problem here is not that focusing on chunking is wrong, but rather that just raising awareness, just helping our learners understand that this is how second language acquisition really works is enough. The lexical approach failed in the sense that what it left me with, and many of you out there with, was that, okay, you got to get all this exposure, these collocations, and here, what do we have for you? We've got these textbooks, these worksheets, these flashcards. But hold on a moment. Those are the tools that have always been used for language learning. Before it was something that was important as a skill that could be used in real life. How many learners do you know out there who are going to be motivated enough to use old methods to memorize? So I had this, experiencing this quandary, right? This issue with understanding how SLA, second language acquisition, worked in terms of the lexical approach, but very confused about how I could help my students until one day I had an epiphany. I was teaching in New Jersey, a group that was largely Korean students who were studying English in New Jersey. And at one moment, and I'll never forget this, I said somewhere or sometime during the lesson, I always, or people always, or I don't know anymore, something with always. And a student said, Coca-Cola. Just like that, popped out, Coca-Cola, always Coca-Cola. This was a student who normally didn't participate. Suddenly, she said Coca-Cola when I said always. I was not talking about Coca-Cola. Why did this student say that? It's because, I think you already figured it out, somehow always Coca-Cola, she associated, she chunked it. It was a collocation. Now, if you're my generation, right, or a little bit older or a little bit younger, possibly you know that in the United States, there was a big marketing thing for Coca-Cola, which was always Coca-Cola. It was everywhere. It was on billboards. It was on television, right? It was on the radio. Always Coca-Cola. When my student did that, and I realized, I wouldn't have, obviously, if I hadn't been already so interested in collocations. When that happened, it was like, whoa, let me test out some others. If I say to my students, just, what do they say? That's right. Just do it because of Nike. Kentucky. Well, it's KFC in a lot of countries, but Kentucky Fried Chicken. My students were chunking language. They were creating collocations. Why was that? It was because they heard and saw these collocations so frequently without trying to learn them for school, without trying to memorize them, right? They came because of the frequency that was delivered to them by Madison Avenue, meaning advertising, right? Oh, so that means if collocations are repeated enough times, our brains remember them, and then, okay, well, then we go out and we remember a company, we want to buy something. Well, can we harness that energy in second language acquisition? I believe we can. That was my mission then. Forget about the, lists, the beautiful pictures of collocations, even the games I was creating to help people practice collocations. Let's get them in some, games. I'll come back to games, whether it's today or soon. Not that games don't work, because maybe they're even better in some ways than songs, but hey, new media came along, YouTube. Let's get songs out there. Songs have rhythm and rhyme. They help you. So instead of, to remember, instead of lists of make and do collocations, let's make a song, make or do or make, thinking about it will make your brain ache. do yourself a favor, give yourself a break, relax and repeat. For fluency's sake, I make sure I make a to-do list, do a few errands, make yourself at home, make a snack. Oh, collocations with have. Instead of thinking about what have goes together with, or looking at a list, let's get repetition. Have a party, have fun, have a cold, have a problem. How about get? I got to know this kid when I got to junior high. I used to get into trouble, get in fights, and get high. So I create songs to help students internalize those collocations. It doesn't have to be a song. It could be any way that you get your students excited to get meaningful repetition. So if you're correcting students here, it's not listen to music. I have French students who will be like, I listen to music, I listen to music. It's listen to music. Is it the correction that will help? Because I think it's more the exposure, the input. If it's repetitive input that is boring, not interesting, it won't work. So can that be gamified? Can it be songified? Well, absolutely. And if it's a song or a game students enjoy, they'll be relaxed. The relaxed state will engage them. It will naturally, right, make them repeat it and do it again, whether it's a song, a game, a video, whatever it is. That's the relax, repeat, remember. You see everywhere the 3 R's that we're going to come back to soon. I have teachers who are a little skeptical. They'll say, okay, well, that's fine, make or do, but what about grammar? Wouldn't it be better to think about grammar with more of a rule? Like, you want to do something. Want plus infinitive, that has this sort of meaning. It's not that you can't go under the microscope and look and think about it and find other similar verbs, right? I wanted to go, offer to go. And then you get into like consider going, and you think maybe a rule doesn't really work anymore with your intent is sort of infinitive. Native speakers of English and more advanced speakers of English that didn't learn things so prescriptively will say to you immediately that they never considered a difference between gerund and infinitive, between make or do, right? Between countable nouns and uncountable nouns, between a phrasal verb that is transitive or intransitive, that it happened because they naturally know. Well, I think things like this, there's no way a student who's had exposure to English enough will say a rule helped them figure this out. When you get to a lower frequency verb, however, there's this pause, no? Not a pause because we have to think about the rule, just because hesitate is a lower frequency verb. Here's what I believe, and I want to see if you agree or not. Take a look. We're back to Bloom's taxonomy. If what you've seen and heard me talk about resonates with you, okay, collocations are these building blocks. These are the chunks we need. That's that knowledge level. That's that easy retrieval level when you have exposure in a way that's fun. After that, right, we can start moving up. Here we go. So that meaningful repetition, right, with collocations. Recall facts and basic concepts. Well, we're not talking about, 9 times 7 is 63. or the, the capital of Moldova is Chisinau. Like, the point is, those are also collocations, right? And they also provide this opportunity to build on top. But when we look at English, it's not about recalling facts and concepts so much as just, well, the fact of language, the fact that it is, make an effort and do homework. So what I talk a lot about is the connection between collocations, which I often reduce to collo, building that knowledge, that ability to recall, that is the foundation, is the basis of this hierarchy of cognitive objectives that Bloom talked about in the 50s, that if we can do that, then we have spark, the superpowered automatic recall of knowledge. I talk about this in a lot of the songs I do. I didn't talk specifically. I kind of gave you some examples of songs that I do. I strongly believe that, meaningful repetition, high exposure into songs with lyrics, with rhyme and rhythm is the best way to acquire chunks of language and then feel motivated, prepared, motivated to use them. However, I'm also a big believer in other ways, especially if you can find a way with your learners that helps them, well, inspires them to repeat the language so they can remember it. At any rate, I hope we can agree that foundation. Let's build a base. Let's look at that base. Knowledge. Remember, let's build a base to support higher thought. What's that higher thought? Let's build a base to support higher thought and hold on to all the things that we're taught. That's from a song I have called More of America. What does it mean to relax? Let's look at the 3 R's. When I say relax, I'm not talking about suggestopedias or, falling asleep and listening to English, tuning out. Relaxing to me is really engagement, having fun, but in a way where you are just intrinsically motivated to have fun. You just love what you're doing. So your whole being is chill. When you do that, what happens? Well, you want to listen again. You want to play again. You want to do it again. I mean, imagine somebody shows you like a funny video, like a sort of a meme, right? But you're not relaxed, you're stressed, right? You're not going to want to watch it again or do it again. If you're in a mental state where you're more relaxed and or what somebody brought to you, whether it's a song, a game, a meme, whatever, is something that you connect with more, because it's certainly not just about, okay, you're in the right mental state. You might be in a stressed mental state. Someone brings you something wonderful and you want to do it again and repeat it. In either case, the formula is, right, to be relaxed, to do it again, and as a result, without any effort at all, remember it. In fact, if you make a conscious effort to commit it to memory, and that's that word I really don't like very much, memorize. Instead, if you just remember naturally, if it happens, you learn it by heart, that song, that game, that video clip, whatever it is, that, my friends, is the power of the 3 R's. So if what we learn with pleasure, if we are relaxed, we repeat and remember, I would argue that what we learn with pleasure We always remember, meaning we never forget. My friends, thank you so much for being here live. I really appreciate you. And because so many people out there cannot come here live, we will, of course, share an edited recording of this webinar. If you're an English teacher or an English learner or both, because there are a lot of us out there who are both, including myself. Yes, I'm a native speaker, but if I weren't a continuous learner of my language, I would have gotten out of this game a long time ago. No way. So learners of English, teachers of English, whether you're native speakers of the language or not, it's irrelevant. It's all about your inspiration and how you inspire others. I hope this has helped you, or if it hasn't helped you, you know someone whom it could help, and you'll get it out there. We will have a recording of this very soon. Thanks so much to the American TESOL Institute for making these monthly webinars possible. Stay tuned for featured teachers later this month. Signing off here from Paris, France. This is Jason Levine, also known as Fluency MC. Peace and respect to all English language teachers and learners out there, and catch you next time. American TESOL webinars. See ya.